Today we're going to be walking a little bit through Lower Manhattan. We're going to be doing the financial district, mostly because the place I was supposed to shoot at bailed, but it's okay. Right now we're walking by Alexander Hamilton Customs House. This was built in 1907. This is back when the U.S. government made most of its money off of customs, not the income tax, before the income tax. This building is pretty beautiful. It's a Beaux-Arts building. You can see in front all the statues were designed by Daniel Chester French. He was actually the sculptor who made the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Pretty cool. And each one represents a different part of the world at the time. Over there, the Far East is the Far East. Right here, North America with the flowing hair, you know, a Liberty Torch, Wheel of Progress. Europe, stiff, hand on world, intent on world domination. And then you got Africa, naked and asleep. Not politically correct, but that's what they thought back then. Anyways, we're walking now through the Bowling Green. This is the first city park in New York City history. And this is actually the original Iron Gate from 1771. If you touch the tops of this, you can actually feel that something was sawed off. It was done when it was the American Revolution. They sawed off what they believe were crowns representing the British crown. They sawed them off. They were crazy. Let's go. We're also at the beginning of Broadway, so you see lots of different buildings. Here, you have number 1 Broadway. That's where the White Star Line used to have its offices. If you don't recognize the White Star Line, they were the owners and the operators of the Titanic. Ah, the Titanic. You guys know that movie? Oh, with Leonardo DiCaprio, and where Rose murders him, you know, not letting him on the door with her. Also, too, you have Standard Oil. That was built in late 1920s. That's where John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company was headquartered. And then right across, you have the Cunard Line building, is where, well, it's a shipping company, but the Lusitania was a Cunard Line ship. And it was sunk in 1915, and it's what precipitated United States entrance into World War I. A lot of history here. Also, too, this fountain. In the middle of this fountain, there used to be a King George statue. That was torn down in 1776. July 9, 1776, they read the Declaration of Independence out for the first time here in New York City. And everyone got so jazzed up, they came here and tore it down and then sent it up out of New York City to melt it down for bullets to use in the Revolution. Pretty sick. This is all the beginning of Broadway, too. It stretches all the way through Manhattan, crosses the Harlem River into the Bronx, then leaves the Bronx, goes about another 100 miles. Pretty long street. Here you have the Charging Bull of Wall Street. Charging Bull of Wall Street's a pretty cool story. So this guy, Arturo Demodico, was the designer. He's the sculptor. But he made it as a way to commemorate the strength and resilience of the stock exchange. Arturo Demodico created this bull with his own money, and then he left it as a gift in front of the stock exchange one night in December with a bow around its neck under a tree that was there. When people showed up the next day to go to work, they saw this huge bull there. And they're like, what is this thing doing here? So they sent it away to be thrown away and discarded. But the newspapers had reported it, and everyone wanted to see it so bad that they just put it right here. But he still owns the bull, which is pretty cool. People come from all over the world to take pictures with its nuts, which is because they think it's good financial luck to touch the bull's nuts. So you're looking at a bunch of future millionaires, I'm sure. Also, too, we're walking north on Broadway. This is what they call the Canyon of Heroes. It's a little area of Broadway where they do the ticker tape parades here. A tradition that started in 1886 when they dedicated the Statue of Liberty. Grover Cleveland went over there, and on his way back, he was going up Broadway to go to City Hall, and everyone was so excited about this new statue that they started throwing ticker tape from the windows because this is the financial district and they have tons of ticker tape. It became a tradition, and they still do it today. So you have here on the ground different names and dates of people who got ticker tape parades thrown for them. You got a lot of them. There's like Jesse Owens, there's like Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower. They don't do them as often as they used to because it's really expensive. The last one they did was the Women's World Cup team. I actually did a video on that one. You're probably thinking too, Broadway, that it has to do with the actual theaters of Broadway, but not anymore. They're called Broadway theaters because the Broadway theaters used to be located off of Broadway back in like the mid-1800s, but now it has nothing to do with Broadway. All a Broadway show means is that it's in a theater holding 500 or more people. Off Broadway is 100 to 499 seats, and off Broadway is less than 100. Would you look at that? This is going to be a pretty quick tour, okay? There's not a, you know, there's a lot to see here, but it's not very big. So chill out. Watch out. Don't want you to get hurt. So we walked off of Broadway here to show you a couple things. I'm going to show you why they call this area the financial district here in a second. We're heading over to Broad Street. Interestingly enough, these street names are really all that's left of any Dutch influence. All the Dutch architecture from the city from back when it was New Amsterdam up until 1664, it's all pretty much gone. But the names of these streets go back to the Dutch. So for example, Stone Street is the first street that was paved in stone. Broad Street was actually a broad street, but it was actually a channel. It was watered initially. They filled it in. A lot of this stuff used to be watered and they filled it in. This is pretty cool. So this is Broad Street, but you can see, look at the subway stop. You see it says the J and the Z subway stop? Well, that's where Jay-Z the rapper got his name. The Jay-Z subway stop near his apartment in Brooklyn. You're learning stuff, man. Look how great this is. Now we're walking and we'll be coming up here to the New York Stock Exchange. Check it out. Pretty cool building. The Stock Exchange actually has its roots in the American Revolution. After the American Revolution, the federal government was looking to pay back the debts incurred during the whole war. So they sold securities under a buttonwood tree in the 1790s. The Stock Exchange was then incorporated in 1817, but its roots went back to that. So for that reason, they keep this little buttonwood tree there to remind you of the humble beginnings of the Stock Exchange. Now you have this massive building, that's the Stock Exchange. It's been there since the early 1900s. George Post designed it. It's pretty cool neoclassical design. The whole idea being it wants to give you this idea of strength and resilience so that when you invest your money in it, you're not horrified that you're going to lose it all, which could very well happen because this is where the stock market crashed in 1929 and it began the Great Depression. Fiorello LaGuardia was the mayor during the Great Depression here in New York, which is one of the reasons why they love him so much, because he was actually able to secure lots of federal grants and work here in New York for people. Can't really go in that easily anymore after 9/11 though. Now here we have Wall Street. This is Wall Street, called Wall Street because there actually used to be a wall on it throughout the 1600s. It was protecting the colony of New Amsterdam and then New York. It was torn down in the late 1600s by the British. The wall used to actually run on this street all the way across to protect the Dutch from the British and the Native Americans. Over here, you got where George Washington was actually sworn in as first president of the United States. Check it out. That's this big old statue where they say he was standing. This is where Federal Hall once stood, like kind of the U.S. Capitol back in the day. They tore it down. This is actually a customs house. This was the customs house before the Alexander Hamilton customs house that we saw before. But inside they got like a little museum. You can actually see the Bible he put his hand on and swore. Also too, this building behind me, or behind you, camera, is actually the old J.P. Morgan headquarters. It was built in the early 1900s. Is the J.P. Morgan headquarters. You guys may know who he is. Very arrogant man. Actually, there's no sign or anything indicating that it's J.P. Morgan. And when they asked him about it, they said, hey, you didn't put a sign saying that it's the J.P. Morgan. He said, well, if you're going to do business with J.P. Morgan, you know it's here. And if you don't know it's here, you don't deserve to know. That's pretty badass. Also, too, people didn't like him too much, which is one of the reasons why in 1920, someone detonated hundreds of pounds of explosives right here. Killed a bunch of people, injured a lot more, but to kind of flex his muscles a little bit, J.P. Morgan left these pockmarks in the side of the building to let everybody know it was going to take a little more than some bombs to stop him from doing business. That's pretty sick. Anyways, let's keep moving. Now in front of me, you got Trinity Church. Trinity Church is the oldest parish in the United States, 1697. That building's only been there since 1846. You may recognize it from National Treasure, a movie with Nicolas Cage. The movie is famous for being the only movie that I've ever fallen asleep watching in the movie theaters. Pretty bad. No protests over there. Lots of protests around here. You used to be able to drive down Wall Street. You can't anymore. After 9/11, they closed it off. Over here to the left, you have the Bank of New York building. It's kind of covered in scaffolding. Started by Alexander Hamilton. It's kind of cool. Who's buried right in Trinity Church, in the cemetery over there. Let's go. It's interesting too that over time Manhattan has actually been added onto a lot. The water from the Hudson River used to actually come up to the back of Trinity Church, but it's added on to since then. Over here to the right, you're going to have the Equitable Building. The Equitable Building was finished in 1916. It's this huge building here to the right. And when it was finished, it casted so much shadow that people here in the area started to complain. So the following year, the city passed regulations requiring buildings of a certain height to go up and in. as they went up, right? So to let sun go in through the, the streets. But that's one of the reasons why you have the wedding cake architecture of some of the buildings in New York, like the Empire State Building, Chrysler Building. They go up and in for that reason, because of this building. So now we're walking into Zuccotti Park. In 2011, this is where Occupy Wall Street began. Occupy Wall Street was just the idea of, I think it was Adbusters was the name of the group, and they thought of this idea of just occupying this public space and just, kind of living here as a protest to the financial crisis and the increasing power and sway of banks over the US government and its policy. And then it spread to over 250 different cities around the world over just a few months. But this is where it all was. Thousands of people would gather here every single day for a couple months. It was super cool, actually. But it all happened here in Zuccotti Park. It's interesting, too, a lot of people say the Occupy Wall Street was a failure because it was beaten down kind of violently, unfortunately. But I think it was good. It changed the conversation. I don't think there would have been a Bernie Sanders, popularity or, using the word one percenter, the phrase one percenter. If you used that before Occupy Wall Street, you were a dirty communist or something. Occupy Wall Street made it mainstream to talk about income inequality. So I don't think it really was a failure. Back there you also have the Federal Reserve Bank. That's the New York branch of the Federal Reserve right over there. And that building was finished in 1924. It's a pretty cool Italian-influenced palazzo-looking building. But under that building is buried actually over $350 billion worth of gold bullion. They say about 5% of all the gold ever mined in the United States, in the world, is under that building. Pretty cool. It's also the building from Die Hard with a Vengeance when they robbed the whole place. It's that building right there. We're kind of at the end of the financial district, though. This is pretty much it. We went through the whole area. Lots of stuff going on still. Lots of banks have their headquarters here because of the proximity to the frickin' stock exchange. I'm getting tongue-tied over here. But it's still very important, even though a lot of the banks have since moved. But anyways, that was a quick little walk. Thought I'd show you around. And see you guys later.